we'd like to acknowledge that this podcast is being performed on the Toronto traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit.
And we'd also like to acknowledge that this podcast is being filmed on the traditional Miami lands of the Tequesta peoples and the Miccosukee peoples. We highly encourage you to check out and learn more about these Indigenous groups. They're fascinating. Thank you very much and enjoy the podcast.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest installment of Cross Continent Chats. I am your host for this evening, Charlie Wayman from Miami, Florida, and I am joined by my friend and co-host Rachael Bishop from Toronto, Ontario. I have a feeling we have a really good podcast tonight, so hope you enjoy. Let's start with the first question. Something that's happening in the news with the NBA and the NFL. The NBA and the NFL players are looking to add phrases and terms that are relating to Black Lives Matter instead of their names on the back of their jerseys. While it is a wonderful sentiment, Stephen A. Smith, who he is controversial as a sports pundit. Stephen A. Smith essentially stated that while this is a great sentiment, it really doesn't show a progression to actually fixing racial injustice. Sure, it's a sentiment, it's a statement, but it isn't a progression. So what are your thoughts on this?
It's a very interesting opinion by Stephen A. Smith, but he does like to stir the pot, as we know. Interestingly enough, though, LeBron James, who has kind of been the forefront of social change and activism in a lot of the NBA, arguably still the best player in the world, he has said he won't put a phrase on the back of his jersey because he doesn't agree with any of them, thinks that they're empty. And Norman Powell of the Toronto Raptors has echoed those statements and said out of all the 26 statements, he didn't really think any of them fit his opinion, and he wanted to write "Am I next?" on his instead because he thought it was a more powerful statement than like Black Lives Matter or all the other ones that are offered. So he also did not agree with this, and the fact that LeBron James didn't, I think, really speaks volumes because he's really been kind of the forefront of a lot of this activism that we've seen in the NBA. He's really been leading the way, and the Toronto Raptors themselves have done a lot as well, and Norman Powell has been one of those guys, and the fact that they both kind of did not agree with this, and Stephen A. Smith, I think it's pretty valid that they think that it's just kind of empty words and the NBA is just doing it to show that they care, but they're not actually doing anything about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a really good answer. But it isn't just the NBA doing empty promises. The players are choosing what phrase to put on the back of their jerseys. This isn't the NBA putting the phrases.
Oh, I know.
I just want to be clear with that.
Yeah. I'm just saying that the players don't think that the options are good enough. They think that they should have been a more variety of more meaningful options to put on the jersey.
But I don't even think it's that. I think also Stephen A. Smith was getting not just to the specific phrase or term, it's just the concept of putting the name on the jersey. He actually went into the LeBron James story of that, as well as he also went into John Lewis. He went into Dr. King. He went into Malcolm X and how all these people didn't protest and get where they are and achieve what they achieved by putting something like putting a name on the back of a jersey. These guys were out marching. These guys were out doing stuff. I think that's also what he's getting at is putting on a name on a jersey, is definitely creating the discussion. But it's also, what are you going to do about it? Because you can discuss all you want.
That's true.
Also, what are you going to do about it? And that's really what he was talking about is, discussion's great. Discussion's happening, which is fantastic. But what's going to be done?
And
because you could discuss for 30 years on the same topic and not get anywhere.
Well, exactly. It's about like talking. There's talk only takes you so far. Sooner or later, you actually have to have action and act on what you're saying, right? Like I said, empty promises.
Yeah, so it's not really against the the phrases. It's against just the concept of putting the name on the jersey.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Stephen A. Smith is black. Just thought we'd clear that up. He's
oh,
and
okay.
he works for ESPN, and he's their most popular media personality.
Yeah, and he's pretty much the highest paid North American sports analyst in the world.
I
Um,
think so.
no, he is. He earns like $10 million a year.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so we're gonna move on a little bit into the NBA. So as the NBA season's going on, they're having 3 scrimmages before they actually start their playoff play-in series. So they're looking, since the NBA bubble, of course, is a bubble and nobody can come in or out. The NBA is looking to having remote broadcasts for their regional sports broadcasting teams that aren't inside the bubble. So, Rachel, in your broadcasting experience,
Mhm.
can you explain how remote broadcasting could work?
So I personally have never done remote broadcasting, but I've heard stories of people who have, and it's from what I've heard, it's definitely very difficult. I've heard stories of someone who was trying to call the World Junior Championships for TSN. Forget the year, but quite a while ago. But Canada wasn't expected to do well, so TSN didn't actually send Canada to the final. I think it was in Sweden or something. So they didn't actually send Canada to the final, to the arena, because they weren't. It wasn't even the gold medal game. So Canada was playing in a different arena, but they called the game that Canada was playing in a. They're in the same country, but a different arena that Canada was actually playing in. And so they're trying to set up, and they're trying to use a small TV to call a game, and they're looking through a TV screen like everyone else, and they're trying to broadcast it through to the feed, but they're not actually there. And it was kind of a fiasco because somehow there was a jersey mix up, and they ended up having the same color jerseys as the opponent, and they only had the one jersey set. And the idea is that if you're the home team, you're supposed to change, but I guess they didn't have another jersey set, so they were able to use the jerseys. I think it was a Swedish team before them or something. So they ended up playing the game in blue jerseys, but there's no names on the back. So they're trying to call a game from remote broadcasting from a different arena, but there's no names. The names and the numbers are all wrong. They're not even there. So that's definitely an extreme example. And they got through the game, and they did a great job. But that's just kind of one thing that you have to deal with remote broadcasting. If something like that does happen, you're not going to have time to switch. Like, you're not able to go and switch out and get a new roster sheet because you're not physically there. So that's definitely something that's difficult. I know for me personally, even with the opponents, the home team I usually know pretty well for the players, but even the opponents, it's quite difficult to remember who's who. And you're trying to look up when you're actually at the arena, and I can only imagine doing it on a small screen, because everything is that much smaller. The players they're moving at a very different pace. You can't get up close to see them actually on the screen, so it'd be a lot harder. Even regular broadcasting, doing play-by-play is quite difficult. So I can only imagine how you're trying to do play-by-play from a studio, like how they're doing the Blue Jays right now. They're calling the games from a studio that they normally use for analysis, and then you're trying to call a game. I can only imagine how much more difficult that would be.
Okay, and so with your experience, you did say a couple of terms that even I'm not familiar with because I'm not really in the broadcasting world. Well, I guess I am now with the pod, but uh, so you were saying things like roster sheets. So just go over a little bit when you're prepping for a game. Let's say I know you worked on the Mustang, the Western University Mustang radio programming. Like, what are the steps to set up for a broadcast, for a hockey broadcast? Because most people don't know how the setup goes.
That's a great question. We are radio, so there wasn't as much, definitely. We didn't have to worry about clothes. Obviously, I dressed nice, but we didn't have to worry about clothes and setting up with screens and things like that. But the setup could be difficult, especially when you're on the road, because everything's mobile, and you have to make sure that your Wi-Fi is actually connected, because sometimes you're on the road and your Wi-Fi doesn't work. So then you have to, or your cables don't work. So then you have to go wireless. So that's sometimes difficult as well. So basically the setup is you have your place in the broadcast booth at the top of the stands, or if you're an actual arena, you have a little box, a proper box, like at ACC, they have a Foster Hewitt media box, for example. And you set up there and you have all your cables. So you have your main box. The name's escaping me right now, but your main box with all your controls on it. And that is and you connect that to your headsets and all that stuff. And then that feed takes you to the studio feed, and that's how you can communicate with the studio. And it's all done via controls, all basically on one main control system. And that's, you can control volume and everything. So you first go there, you set that up, you make sure all that's in working order, you make sure the volume's all right, you make sure that you can actually get a feed to studio, because sometimes you do get cut out. You want to make sure you're doing it at the right time, and then you practice. And then the hard part that's pretty easy. And connecting with the microphones, headsets like what we're wearing now, making sure that they're set up and they're not staticky and they sound right, and making sure that you're pausing if you have to cough or move around, shuffle papers. And then this is just when you're getting to the arena. And then the tricky part is making sure that the wireless mic works for the person who's down at ice level doing the interviews. So for us, our school system, our acoustics were really bad. So the wireless mic never actually worked. Meaning that the people in the booth, they would talk to you, but it wouldn't actually transfer to your ear. You wouldn't hear. So the way we had to do it was you had to get to a spot in the arena, and most arenas it didn't work. The only arena where it actually worked was Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, Ryerson. So you'd have to get to a spot at the arena where you could see the people in the broadcast booth, so the color commentator and the play-by-play person, and you had to get to a spot where you could see them, and then they would actually point to you to tell you that's when you'd start talking. So you had to be watching to make sure that you'd start talking. Otherwise, you'd miss it, because the ComTech, that's what it's called, didn't actually transfer or work. So that was another little chestnut that we had to jiggle. So that was difficult. And then in terms of roster sheets, that's just going to the coach, talking to the coaches before the game, half an hour before the game, going to the dressing room. And we had good rapport, so they knew us. Obviously, if you're working for a bigger media outlet, you'll have some sort of media badge, or there'll be some sort of media before a scrum before the game. This was on a much smaller scale, but we'd go to the coach, and we'd usually start with the away coach, and we'd have players in mind that we wanted the ice level person to talk to. So we'd ask if we could talk to them, and then we would just get the starting lineup from the coach, and they'd usually give us, the arena usually had a roster sheet that they gave us, a game sheet, but what I would often do is I'd print out my own from the website that had the stats on it, and then I'd just go by that and circle the starting lineup, or scratch out the scratches, and then same thing for the other coach as well. And some coaches would actually give you, the Mustangs coach actually did give the lineup to some of the broadcasters. So that was kind of how it would work. And then we'd go back up to the booth, and then we'd get ready to call the game.
That's awesome. I definitely learned a lot about that. We're gonna skip to we're not really gonna skip. We're gonna segue into hockey. But NHL, the top level, best league in the world. So playing is coming, starting next Saturday, August 1st. We're having the Stanley Cup qualifying rounds, and I'll get into that a bit with our sports spectacles this week. But I wanted to look at NHL goalie battles, and I wanted to look at three particular teams that have really interesting goalie battles in terms of fighting for the starting spot for the play-in series. We have the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the New York Rangers, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. So for the Vegas Golden Knights, who would you start? Marc-Andre Fleury or Robin Lehner?
For me, it's a no-brainer. I'm definitely starting Robin Lehner. As a Penguins fan, I endured many Fleury playoff meltdowns over the years. He lost his job several times. He was better, to his credit, after he saw a sports psychologist at the request of former GM Ray Shero. He was better, but he's still not someone I trust in playoffs. And Fleury is getting old. He's 34 right now. So, he's getting the wrong side of, actually, I think he's older. Yeah, he's 35. So he's turning 36. So he's getting the wrong side of 30. Once you get past 30 for goalie, you really start to decline. And he's never been some amazing goalie anyways. His save percentage this season is only .905, which is one of the lowest of his career, actually, in 49 games, 48 games that he started. He's won 27, lost 16. He's got a 905 save percentage, which is bad, which for those of you who don't know means that he's stopped just barely 90% of the shots that he faces, which seems good in reality. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the best goalies are stopping 915, 920, 925, 90% of the shots is not good at all. He's got 5 shutouts, but again, he's on a good team. He actually has 8 penalty minutes, which is funny. So Robin Lehner would be, for me, the guy who I would start. He's only played 3 games with Vegas this season because he was traded at the trade deadline, and then the season shut down soon after that. But he has a 940 save percentage, and he was excellent with Chicago. All this season, he's played 36 games for the Chicago Blackhawks and has a 920 save percentage. So for Vegas, he's got a 940. Overall for Chicago, he's got a 920. So he's played a little bit fewer games than Fleury, but he's overall a better goaltender. I never understood why Buffalo got rid of him. He's younger. He's more consistent. He's overall better. He has a lot of experience. So I would start Robin Lehner.
Awesome.
For Vegas.
All right. Now let's go into the most interesting one, in my opinion, is the New York Rangers. You could have the 2 young guns, Igor Shesterkin or Georgiev. I think it's Alexander Georgiev.
Yeah.
Or you could have the veteran, the probably future Hall of Famer, who is old, but you never know. He's amazing in the playoffs, Henrik Lundqvist, a.k.a. the King. Who would you play?
This is a great question. Georgiev's played 34 games. Lundqvist has played 30. So they basically split the season. Shesterkin came in at the very end. He's only played 12, so I wouldn't play him. He's still a little bit green. But Georgiev and Lundqvist were basically 1A and 1B this season. Georgiev had a 910 save percentage, and Lundqvist had a 905. So that's quite a big difference, for sure. Georgiev is younger. Henrik is the King, but he is old. He is on the wrong side of 30. He's 38, so he's almost 40. So that's getting up there. It's quite old. So and Georgiev is young, and plus also he's trade fodder because they have Shesterkin now. He's supposed to be the new hotshot. So the coach might want to play Georgiev just to kind of showcase him and let teams know what he can do. So head coach David Quinn. So if it were me, I would play Alexander Georgiev for the showcase reason, and also because I think he's just had a better season. I would still have Lundqvist as the backup because I still think he's important to have on the bench for moral support and in the dressing room, because someone like that, even if he's not playing, you need his leadership skills on the bench. He could be another coach on the bench. He could be another coach in the locker room. So I would still keep him as the backup, and maybe it'll end up being like a Braden Holtby type situation. Georgiev will suck, and maybe they'll turn to Lundqvist, and he'll somehow turn back the clock 20 years because Brodeur did that when Brodeur was old. He somehow was still magical in the playoffs. So Lundqvist could do that. I would start the first game, though, with Georgiev, see how it goes, and then if it's going badly, maybe go to Lundqvist. But remember, the Rangers are already exceeding expectations, so I don't think that they'll be rushing to put Lundqvist in just because they've already done better than they thought they would do.
No, that's valid. It could also be I'm going to turn back the clock a little bit. It could also be a Pittsburgh Penguins Thomas Vokoun situation.
Yes.
Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't playing very well, I believe.
No, he was not.
He was not. And they went to a very old and ripe, I'll say ripe, very old and ripe Thomas Vokoun, who absolutely stole the show. So
that was a season I'd rather forget because we got swept by Boston in the 3rd round. But the only reason why I've even made it that far was because Vokoun absolutely stood on his head. The first 2 games against the Islanders, Fleury was atrocious, and Vokoun came in and stole the show. No one else on the team showed up except for Thomas Vokoun, and he was old, but he was still absolutely fantastic. So that's a great example.
Yeah, who knows? It could be something. Now the last team that I'm looking at is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Not really a team I particularly like, but they do have an interesting goalie battle. You have the starter, Jonas Korpisalo, or you have the newcomer, Latvian goalie Elvis Merzlikins, who has pulled off some amazing games, and he is a very happy man when he wins. I'll put it that way. So who would you pick, Merzlikins or Korpisalo?
I am not a huge Corpusala fan. I don't really think he's very good. But at the same time, Merzlikins is very unproven. He is 24, so he is basically in the prime age of a goaltender, and he's played 33 games, and Korpisalo has played 37. So they've played almost the same number of games. But Zirklin's save percentage, though, is significantly better at 923, and Korpisalo's is only 911. And I've already mentioned that I don't like Korpisalo. I don't think he's a very good goaltender. So I would take a chance and play Merzlikins. You never know. He could pull a Matt Murray and win the cup as a rookie. Hopefully he doesn't. But I think that he will give them a better chance to win. You always want to play the goaltender that gives your team the best chance to win. And I think at this point, that's Merzlikins. And if he doesn't play well, then you put in Korpisalo. But as I've said already, I don't think Korpisalo is a very good goalie. So I'm not sure how good Merzlikins is, but you might as well ride the hot hand.
So that ends our question portion for this evening's podcast, and we're going to go right into sports spectacles. If you don't know what sports spectacles is, essentially I talk about different sports matchups that I like to see and that I'm looking forward to see on the evenings when I don't work for this coming week. So we're going to go into the week of Wednesday, the 29th of July, the Italian League. We have Serie A, Italian soccer. There's a ton of games that's happening on this day. A game that really catches my eye is Cagliari versus Juventus. Of course, Juventus is the 8-time in a row champion of Italy. It's actually very boring, but Cagliari is not as bad as people think they are, or they've had some interesting games, and I really think that with Juve now essentially taking it easy, Cagliari will make it a very interesting game. Who knows, Cristiano Ronaldo might continue his scoring streak because he's still scoring at least 1 or 2 goals a game. I would take that one for that. The other matchup that I would encourage folks to watch is Fiorentina and Bologna. That is another one that is a bit of a lower tier matchup, but it should be good. It should be good quality footy. And for the first time, because there's actually games, NBA and NHL. So, well, I'll let Rachel pick NBA or NHL first.
Save best for last. Let's go NBA first.
NBA first. Thank you very much. Thanks for the assist there. Appreciate it. So we're going to start with the NBA. Yes, I know it's scrimmage series. Yes, it's not actually the playoff series, but I actually tuned in to watch my Miami Heat play on the Sacramento Kings, and it was actually very good quality basketball. One of my players, Duncan Robinson, was shooting some mad threes, and it was absolutely wonderful, shooting buckets. So let's start on Thursday, the 30th of July. There's going to be a really good one at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It is the LA Clippers, led by Kawhi Leonard, and the LA Lakers, led by LeBron James. So definitely cue into Battle of LA. Even though this is a play-in series and it doesn't really count for anything, you will see stars in this because they want to work out. They've been away for so long, so they're wanting to be back in game shape. But you're also going to be able to see NBA G League or the Development League players actually have a chance. NBA teams have an expanded roster, so because of that, you're going to be seeing a lot of younger players show their stuff. The Miami Heat has a couple players from their affiliate in the Sioux Falls Skyforce, and there's one guy who has elite shooting ability. So it's really nice to look at the future, and they're actually going to be able to have experience playing playoff quality basketball while in the bubble. Then we're gonna go into Friday, and the game I really would like to see is the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. So those are two top teams in the East. That's definitely going to be a huge battle. You're going to have Jason Tatum on Boston. You're going to have Giannis Antetokounmpo on the Bucks. That is going to be a beauty, one more time, matchup. Now we're going to go into NHL. Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes. That's going to be a fantastic matchup. I know we just talked about their goalie situation, but that's going to be fast. That's going to be exciting. They're both dynamic teams with both interesting goalie situations. So definitely tune into Rangers and Hurricanes. The other matchup I would like you viewers to check out is the Winnipeg Jets and the Calgary Flames. Those are two top teams. They are very fast. They're dynamic. They have amazing scorers. You can look at Kyle Connor for the Winnipeg Jets. You could look at Matthew Tkachuk for the Calgary Flames. Two young players that are literally in the time of their lives scoring for each team. So I recommend watching those two. And those are my sports spectacles for the week. Now we're going to go into our final segment of the night. And it is the marketplace. So anything transfers, anything coaching hirings, any firings, anything related to the business side of things. This is Rachel's specialty. So let the expert do her thing.
Of course, the new team in the NHL has announced its name, and they're called the Kraken, the Seattle Kraken, which is awesome. I really want them to have, for their opening video, Ellen Page do her Kraken from the Sea moment from Juno. It's just perfect. Record that and have it as their opening montage. But anyways, I digress. They're also looking for a head coach. And according to TSN's Darren Dreger, who is an insider, who's a very legitimate source, Gerard Gallant is definitely in the mix. Of course, Gerard Gallant was, after he was unceremoniously and unfairly let go by the Florida Panthers and left to fend for himself to hail a taxi in Carolina, he was hired as the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights when they were the expansion team back in 2017. And then he was let go from Vegas this season, and now he is expected to be in the mix for the Seattle Kraken, which I think would be a great choice. Gallant is a good mix to have for an expansion team because he is a no-nonsense coach, but he's not totally in the old school mold system that we've been kicking out a lot lately. He's still a system coach. He's not an analytics coach, which is what I like. But if you're going to have a team like that, it's an expansion team. I think it's good to have a kind of a tough, no-nonsense coach, but he's still a little bit of a player's coach to kind of get yourself established with the fan base. If you have a coach that's too willy-nilly right away, it might not go over well with your owners and your team. Also, Tim Lewicki is running the ownership in Seattle, and he has done a very good job of bringing franchises and hiring people. He brought Brandon Shanahan to Toronto, and Shanahan's done a pretty good job in Toronto so far. So I would look out for that, see what happens there. I think Gallant would be good hiring. Of course, Bruce Boudreau is still in the mix. I haven't heard anything about him, but for my money, Bruce Boudreau is the best coach in the NHL who's not coaching right now. When he is coaching, he is a top 3 coach in the league. He definitely should be a candidate. So I would look out to see if he's interested. Of course, it's really up to him because I think he can coach anywhere at this point. I'd be interested to see if Bruce Boudreau takes that job because I would love to see Bruce Boudreau coach in the NHL again because he's phenomenal. Although I'd personally like him on the Penguins or the Leafs, but anyways, so I would definitely watch out for that. I think that'll be an interesting battle. They still have a lot of time. They're not going to be in the league until 2022. So or 2021 next season. 2 seasons from now. Sorry. So there's still much a lot of time for them to get that settled. And the last thing I have for the transfer market. Well, I guess the second last thing I have for you today is I talked last week about Canada midfield women's soccer player Jessie Fleming and how she was expected to go to Europe, and that news came out previously last week that she did sign in Europe and she will be going to Chelsea FC women's team. Chelsea FC just won the Women's Super League, which is the Women's Premier League in England. They just won that last season. And they beat Manchester City in the finals. Manchester City is where her teammate Janine Becky plays. So that would be fun to see those rivalries. And there's another player on Team Canada who also plays in the Women's Super League for West Ham, and that's Adriana Leon. So that's 3 playing in the Women's Super League, which we never had women's players or men's players playing in Europe for Canada. Now we have 3 playing in England, and now we have also 3 playing in France. You have Kadisha Buchanan, Ashley Lawrence, and the youngster Jordan Hedema, who actually skipped college to turn pro, which was a big deal, and she's killing it She's only 18 and she's doing a really good job in France. So we have 6 playing overseas, which is a really big deal for Canadian soccer. And then you have all the men doing a really good job. So things are really looking up for the Canadian soccer program for sure, which is really exciting. And Jessie Fleming is a really, really good player. She's a really good box-to-box midfielder. She plays a lot. She runs a lot. She made her Team Canada debut at age 15, second youngest player ever to do it. She's already been in 2 World Cups and an Olympics, and she's only 22. So she's accomplished for sure. And the last thing I have for you today is Liverpool's defender Dejan Lovren is expected to leave and sign in Russia. This is not a surprise because he hasn't been playing, and he's way behind on the pecking order in terms of defenders. So he's expected to sign in Zenit St. Petersburg in the Russian league for 12 million euros. He played for the Reds for 6 seasons, so that's quite a long time. He won a Champions League. He won a Premier League. He's really done his due diligence. He plays for the Croatian national team. He is getting old, and as I mentioned, there's other players who've really come up ahead of him in terms of defense. You've seen the emergence of Trent Alexander-Arnold. We also now have Virgil van Dijk, so he's taken over his spot. And then in terms of the subs, you have Joel Matip and Joe Gomez, who have kind of taken over as well. So I'm not surprised he's leaving. It's been a good run, but it's just interesting that he's going all the way to the Russian league from the Premier League. It's definitely a drop-off of competition for sure. But as I said, he is old. And that's all I have for the marketplace for this week.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rachel. I actually just want to add a tidbit. Dejan Lovren is the first Croatian to win the English Premier League.
That's very cool.
He's the first person from his country of Croatia to win in England.
That's very cool.
Very cool. And there are actually Canadian players in the past that have played for Europe on the men's side. The longtime player in Canada, he actually was once a highly touted prospect. He actually played for Cardiff in Premier League. His name is Junior Hoylett.
Oh yeah, he's still playing. He's still playing for Cardiff. Yep.
Yeah, and so he actually has had Premier League experience, and he is a representative of Team Canada. And with that, folks, it is time to end. Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. On behalf of Rachel and myself, thank you very much. Stay safe. Good night.